What heuristics and biases can interfere with our decisions? Let's begin by defining our keywords. Heuristics are mental shortcuts we use to process information faster, but with less accuracy. These shortcuts can lead to different types of biases, all of which describe the tendency for people to make irrational or illogical judgments about their environment. These shortcuts and errors are stubborn. To overcome them, it takes more than just increased self-awareness. It takes practice and persistence. In this video, we'll learn about 3 mental shortcuts and 5 biases that are applicable to a manager's role. Let's learn about some of these heuristics, starting with the anchoring and adjustment effect. Sometimes the way a decision is worded can influence how we think about it. This is called the anchoring and adjustment effect. It's the tendency to adjust your estimation of some variable based on the estimation provided. Let's say I asked one group to estimate the length of the Mississippi River by asking whether it is more or less than 5,000 miles long. The availability and adjustment effect would lead people in this group to make estimations closer to 5,000 miles because that is the anchor provided in the question. Suppose that I asked another group the same question, except I changed the anchor to 2,500 miles. The people in this group would likely make estimations closer to 2,500 miles, which is actually closer to the right answer of 2,320 miles. Thus, the way we frame a decision can lead us to make inaccurate assumptions about it. The next heuristic is the availability heuristic. When we use information that is readily available to us, instead of actively searching for important information, we are falling prey to the availability heuristic. As a result, we may interpret some behaviors or events to be more frequent or important than they actually are. For instance, after reading about a fatal plane accident, we decide to never fly again. Statistically, airplane crashes are rare. The chances are 1 in more than 10 million. But since we just read about one, we use that information to make a decision, and we ignore statistics. Or we sometimes choose a solution because we've heard that other organizations have had success with implementing it. Representative heuristic is another shortcut we often use. This occurs when we ignore statistics and use personal experiences and mental representations to make decisions about new situations. Imagine you meet a new person at a networking event. He tells you he went to an Ivy League school, worked in Washington, D.C. for a few years, works 24/7, and is fairly aggressive. Based on this information, is he a manager or a lawyer? If you use the representative heuristic, you might answer lawyer, because his characteristics fit your mental representation of what a lawyer is. The problem is our representations aren't always correct and can lead us to draw inaccurate conclusions about people and situations. There are actually 4 times as many managers as lawyers in the United States of America. Now let's turn to the confirmation bias. This occurs when we pay attention to information that supports our existing beliefs and ignore information that conflicts with our beliefs. Part of the reason we do this is to protect our self-esteem. We want to feel good about ourselves and think we are right about how we see the world. Conflicting information threatens our self-esteem, and we ignore it to protect our self-esteem. The next bias is escalation of commitment. When things aren't going the way we had planned, we have a strange tendency to continue the same course of action even though we don't know that it will pay off in the future. This is called escalation of commitment. For instance, in the early 1980s, the New York City Parks Department began to refurbish the non-functioning Woolman rink. As time went on, the project fell apart, but the city continued to spend money and time trying to regain what it had lost. After 6 years, the city had spent about $13 million, but the rink still wasn't finished. This is escalation of commitment. The next bias is the overconfidence bias. At times, we are overconfident in ourselves, believing we will succeed because we are special, and others will fail because they aren't as special as us. One interesting and memorable study about the overconfidence bias found that college students made better predictions about the stock market than stock market professionals. Why? Because the students used probability statistics and past stock performance to make their decisions, but the stock market professionals committed the overconfidence bias by relying more heavily on their own personal judgment and experience. The fundamental attribution error is an important bias for us to consider. When trying to determine why people behave the way they do, we tend to blame internal causes and ignore external causes, committing the fundamental attribution error. For example, assume one of your employees is late. If you commit the fundamental attribution error, you will blame the employee's tardiness on some internal quality, assuming he is lazy or irresponsible. But you'll ignore potential situational causes like unpredictable rush hour traffic. The final bias we'll learn about today is the self-serving bias. When it comes to our own behavior, however, we tend to blame our failures on the situation and attribute our success to our personal characteristics. When you succeed, you tend to think it's because of all the things you did. When you fail, you tend to think it's because of what other people did or didn't do, or because of other factors in the situation. For instance, you might say your good grades are due to your dedication and hard work, while your poor grades are because the professor designed a terrible course. For these reasons, it is crucial for us to expand the way we think about other people and events in our work environment.